I was 28 years old when the echo of my crutches filled the polished hall of the Denver courthouse. Each step carried the weight of my pain, the hollow sound bouncing off the walls like a reminder of what I had lost. My heart thudded so hard it nearly drowned out the murmurs of the crowd. I saw them, my family, sitting there as if they had already won, smug expressions carved into their faces. Their eyes widened the moment they saw me, not broken, not gone, but alive. Alive and standing, even if it took every ounce of strength I had left. But it was not me who made my father leap from his seat. It was the woman who walked beside me. His face turned pale. His voice cracked through the tense silence as he shouted, "Oh my God! It's her." The room froze, as though time itself held its breath. They thought I would never rise again. They thought that by leaving me in that hospital bed, they had buried both my body and my future. My sister, my parents, they believed they had stripped away everything I had built. A contract worth $10 million. My life's achievement. My proof that I was more than the shadow they always painted me to be. They thought it was theirs now. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Tell me, if it were you, would you forgive them? Or would you make them pay? It all began months earlier, before that day in court. I had just stepped out of a gleaming office tower in the heart of Denver. My hands trembled as I clutched the papers, my signature sprawled across the bottom. $10 million. A contract that secured my medical diagnostic algorithm, a creation I had poured years of sleepless nights into, now bound to a major healthcare corporation. I was a software engineer who had finally carved her name into history. At 28, I stood on the peak of my own mountain. I could not wait to share the news. Driving back to my parents' suburban home, my chest swelled with pride, rehearsing the joy on their faces when I told them. The front door creaked open, and there was my sister, seated at the kitchen table, her arms crossed, her eyes calculating. She was 32, always polished, always in control, the golden child in their eyes. She had the perfect smile, the perfect posture, the perfect career as a project manager at the same company where I had built my code. Yet that day her lips did not stretch into celebration. They curled into something darker. I held up the contract like a trophy. I did it. $10 million for my algorithm. Her head tilted, and with a sharp laugh she snapped back. Your algorithm? The one I shepherded through meetings? The one I had to defend to executives? Her voice dripped with venom, years of jealousy spilling into the open. I froze, searching her face for even a flicker of sisterly pride. There was none, only rage. I tried to explain, my voice shaking. The lines of code, the endless testing, the failures and triumphs, that was all me, my work, my blood and sweat. But she stood, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. Her face inches from mine, she hissed, "You think you're better than me?" That was when I made my mistake. I backed away, my hands raised, trying to calm her, trying to avoid a fight. Step by step, until my heel found the top stair. Her hands struck my shoulders. The world tilted. Pain screamed through my skull as I crashed down the staircase, every bone rattling, darkness pulling me under. When I opened my eyes again, it was not to the warmth of family or the safety of home. It was to the steady beeping of a hospital monitor and the cold glow of fluorescent light. My leg was wrapped tight. My head throbbed as though my brain had split in two. A nurse's voice softened the edge of the pain. "You're awake." "How long?" I croaked. 2 weeks, she whispered. 2 weeks in a coma. My chest tightened. Where was my family? Where was my sister? My parents? The nurse hesitated, then looked away. No one has been here. Your parents called once, but they never came. Her words cut deeper than my injuries. They said you brought this on yourself. That you had shamed them. I stared at the ceiling, my heart hollowing, abandoned, betrayed, left to rot while they stripped away the life I had fought so hard to build. Days dragged into nights, and each hour I remained in that hospital room felt like a lifetime. The silence pressed against me, thicker than the bandages wrapped around my body. Nurses came and went, their footsteps fading like whispers. But the door I kept watching stayed closed. Not my father, not my mother, not even my sister. The people who should have cared the most had turned their backs. I thought of the years I had tried to win their approval. My father's stern face, always praising my sister's accomplishments, always shrugging at mine. My mother's eyes lighting up for her but dimming when they turned to me. It was a pattern etched into my childhood, like a scar you learn to live with. But now, lying in that bed, I realized it was more than favoritism, it was rejection. One morning, the door creaked open. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe they had come. Maybe someone had changed their mind. But it was her, my sister. She walked in, her arms folded, her lips curling into a smirk. Still clinging to life, huh? Her words were blades, slicing through the fragile hope I had left. You're holding everyone back, you know. I struggled to shift, pain burning through my leg, glaring at her. Why are you here? I managed. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp in the air. Just making sure you stay out of my way. Then she straightened and walked out, her heels clicking with every step. But it wasn't just cruelty in her tone. There was something else, something calculated, as if she was guarding a secret. That suspicion grew when my best friend finally pushed past the hospital's restrictions and slipped into my room. Her embrace was the first real comfort I had felt since waking. I've been trying to see you for weeks, she whispered, her voice trembling. Then she drew in a breath, her expression shifting. I need to tell you something. Her words spilled out like stones crashing down. Your sister's been telling people at work that she's taking over your contract. She's claiming the algorithm was hers all along. My stomach twisted, the room spinning faster than the fall down the stairs. The very thing I had sacrificed everything for, the sleepless nights. The broken code patched and rebuilt was being paraded around as hers. That night, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, the glow of the screen blurring through my tears. I needed control, even a shred of it. I opened my banking app, hoping at least my savings could cover my hospital bills. But instead of numbers, a red warning filled the screen. Account frozen. My breath caught. I dialed the bank, my voice breaking as I asked for answers. The representative's words felt like ice poured down my spine. A court order has frozen your funds. It cites concerns about your ability to manage them. Ability. That single word stabbed deeper than any injury. Someone was painting me as incapable, incompetent. And suddenly, it all clicked. Her smug face in my hospital room. The arrogance in her voice. This wasn't just jealousy. This was a plan. A week later, when I was still reeling, a man in his 30s walked into my room, sharp eyes, calm voice. He introduced himself as an attorney. He carried a folder thick with papers, his expression heavy with truth. I'm here about your contract, he said. Sliding the documents across my bed. I scanned them, my hands trembling. Legal forms, stamped and official, declaring me unfit to manage my own affairs. At the bottom was my signature. My signature, but one I had never written. These were forged. And the forms transferred my deal to someone else. My sister's smirk flashed in my mind. She wasn't just claiming credit. She was rewriting history. I asked him how he found me. He explained a colleague, worried about my sudden absence, had hired him to investigate. The court order freezing my funds. The forged papers, they were just the beginning. He leaned forward, his voice steady but grim. Someone is trying to erase you. The weight of his words pressed against my chest. My sister wasn't simply betraying me. She was attempting to erase me from my own life. That afternoon, another visitor came. A woman in her 40s, calm but resolute, introduced herself as the doctor who had overseen my care. She pulled up my medical chart, her brow furrowed. "I found something troubling," she said softly. "Your records were altered after you were admitted." Her finger traced the screen, pointing to entries that didn't belong: extended sedation, exaggerated neurological issues, fabricated symptoms that painted me as someone who would never wake, never recover. "None of these match your actual condition," she said firmly. "Someone wanted it to look like you'd remain incapacitated. That's why the court order went through so quickly." A chill crawled down my spine. This was no longer about money. It was about control. About removing me completely from the picture. Lying there, I began to see it all with startling clarity. My sister had been grooming this moment for years. I remembered her as a child, snatching toys from me with a victorious grin while our parents praised her confidence. By 10, she had perfected the art of spinning every conflict in her favor, turning their eyes against me. As teenagers, she decided where we went on vacation, who got the bigger room, who was responsible in their eyes. And my parents? They rewarded her cunning, they rewarded her lies. But now, it wasn't just childhood rivalry. It was theft. It was fraud. It was an attempt to destroy me entirely. For the first time since my fall, I felt something burn inside me, not fear, not despair, resolve. I told the lawyer and the doctor that I would fight. I wasn't just going to lie in that hospital bed while she stole my name, my work, my future. The lawyer's eyes sparked with determination. The doctor promised to document every discrepancy. Together, we started to build a plan. Against medical advice, I discharged myself from the hospital. My body was weak, my legs screamed with every step, but my anger carried me forward. I arranged to meet my sister at a small cafe in Denver. Before leaving, I tucked a recorder into my pocket, the device pressing against my ribs like a secret weapon. She was already there when I arrived, leaning back in her chair with a cup of coffee, her expression relaxed but sharp. "You're up," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Didn't think you'd make it." I forced a thin smile, sliding into the chair across from her. I asked about the contract, my tone casual. She smirked, swirling her cup. "The contract's moving forward," she said smoothly. "Someone had to step up since you were indisposed." My stomach churned, but I kept my voice steady. "You mean my contract?" Her laugh was cold, sharp as broken glass. "It's mine now. You weren't going to manage it from a hospital bed." The recorder captured every word, every admission. She thought she was clever, untouchable. But she had just sealed her own fate. Back at my temporary apartment, I met with a private investigator the lawyer had recommended. A woman in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She spread bank statements across the table, her voice brisk. "I've been digging into your sister's finances." She pointed to a series of payments, large transfers, $10,000 at a time, wired to a colleague at my company. The name leapt out at me, a man who had always seemed too eager to impress her. "He's been forging company documents," she explained, "making it look like your sister was the lead on your algorithm." My blood boiled. She wasn't just taking credit. She was paying to erase me from my own work. Later that evening, my best friend called, her voice urgent. "I found something you need to see." She forwarded me a chain of emails. I opened them with trembling hands, my eyes devouring the words. In one, my sister wrote to our boss, "With Ella out, I'm stepping in to replace her. The contract's in good hands." Another email bragged about her vision for the algorithm, as though I had never existed. Each line was another stab, another betrayal. She was rewriting the story, sentence by sentence, until my name disappeared. But she hadn't counted on me rising from the shadows. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just ambition gone too far. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to erase me. And the betrayal cut deeper because it came from the very people who should have been standing by my side. I called the hospital's administration office, determined to dig into what the doctor had warned me about. The administrator's voice was brisk but uneasy as she pulled up my file. "There is evidence of unauthorized changes," she admitted. "Entries were added that exaggerated your condition, suggesting you'd be incapacitated for months." I gripped the phone tighter. Who had access? She hesitated, then answered. "Only a handful of staff members. But we've discovered an external request came through a legal channel." A legal channel. My sister's fingerprints were everywhere. She had the resources, the connections, and she was ruthless enough to use them. I met with my lawyer in his cramped Denver office, the walls lined with case files stacked like towers ready to topple. He listened carefully, piecing together the evidence, bank statements, forged documents, the recording from the cafe, and now the altered medical records. His jaw tightened. "We're building a strong case. We'll file a lawsuit charging fraud and conspiracy." The weight of his words pressed against my chest. Taking her to court meant facing my parents too, the people who had stood by her, enabling her cruelty for years. But when he said the recording would be admissible because Colorado law allowed one-party consent, hope sparked in me. I hadn't risked everything for nothing. The next day, I met Dr. Price again in a quiet hospital conference room. She handed me a folder thick with her notes. "This confirms the unauthorized changes," she explained, her tone steady. "Entries added to exaggerate your coma, to make it seem like you'd never recover." I flipped through the pages, my throat tightening as I read each falsified line. She looked me in the eyes. "I'll testify. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to bury you." Her promise steadied me, but it also ripped open old wounds. I remembered family dinners where my sister monopolized every story, earning smiles while my own achievements were ignored. I remembered winning a science fair at 15, only for my mother to praise my sister's art project instead. I remembered my father's dismissive nods, always calling my work impractical, too abstract. Their favoritism had pushed me harder, driven me to pour everything into building the algorithm that would prove my worth. But even then, they hadn't cared. And now, they had chosen her lies over my survival. That evening, I sat on a bench in the park near the courthouse, the cold air biting through my coat. My body ached, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for money. I wasn't just fighting for recognition. I was fighting for truth. For the years I had clawed to prove myself. For the identity my sister was trying to erase. The day of the trial arrived, and the air inside the Denver courtroom buzzed like static. I sat beside my lawyer, my palms clammy, my heart pounding like a drum that wouldn't stop. He stood, his voice clear and commanding, addressing the judge. "We have undeniable evidence of a conspiracy to defraud my client." First came the recording. My sister's voice echoed through the room, smug and sure of herself. "It's mine now." The gallery gasped, whispers rippling through the benches. Then came the forged documents, showing how she had manipulated company records to crown herself as the genius behind my creation. My eyes flicked to her across the room. Her face had gone pale, though she tried to hold onto her mask of defiance. The bank statements followed, revealing the payments to the colleague who had helped forge her lies. The emails came next, her own words bragging about stepping into my place, her confidence dripping through every line. Piece by piece, the house she built crumbled. Finally, Dr. Price took the stand. Her testimony was calm, clinical, but devastating. The records were altered to make Ella appear permanently incapacitated. False entries justified stripping her rights. The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen scratching notes, her expression unreadable. But I felt hope surge in my chest. The truth was finally being laid bare. When it was my sister's turn to speak, her voice was sharp, but her confidence wavered. She claimed she had only been protecting the company, that I was unstable, unfit to lead such a massive deal. Her eyes darted nervously toward the judge, searching for sympathy, for some thread of credibility. But the lies cracked under their own weight. Then came Mark, the colleague who had taken her money to forge documents. He stood stiff, his face pale as chalk. "I was just following orders," he stammered, refusing to meet my eyes. The courtroom air turned colder with every word he spoke, his excuses falling flat. The judge's frown deepened, disappointment heavy in her gaze. From the gallery, I caught sight of my parents. My mother clutched my father's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her lips trembled, caught between denial and fear. My father stared forward, rigid, his mask of control finally beginning to crack. For decades they had shielded her, excused her, lifted her above me, but now their complicity was exposed under the harsh lights of the courtroom. When my lawyer called me to testify, my heart nearly beat its way out of my chest. I walked slowly to the stand, every step a battle against the weakness in my leg. The judge's eyes met mine as I raised my hand and swore to tell the truth. And then it was time. I spoke of the algorithm, the years I had poured into it, the endless nights of failure and triumph, the sacrifices I had made. I spoke of the night on the staircase, the push, the darkness, the coma. I spoke of waking alone, abandoned, and discovering the cruel betrayal that followed. My voice shook, but it did not break. They thought I'd stay silent, I told the courtroom. But I am here. I am here for justice. Silence followed, the kind that presses against the skin, heavy and electric. My sister glared at me, her bravado unraveling. My parents looked down, unable to meet my eyes. For the first time in my life, the power shifted. The judge deliberated, her silence stretching minutes into what felt like hours. My chest tightened with every tick of the clock. Until finally, she spoke. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said firmly. The defendant orchestrated a calculated scheme to defraud Miss Lane of her intellectual property and financial rights. The words rang through the courtroom, final and unshakable. She sentenced my sister to 4 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Mark received 2 years for his role in forging documents. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding, relief washing through me like a flood. But the judge was not finished. As for the parents, she continued, their enabling of this scheme warrants civil damages. My mother gasped, covering her face with trembling hands. My father's shoulders slumped. The proud authority he always carried shattered in an instant. When the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift from me. The courtroom emptied slowly, my family leaving in disgrace. My sister's mask of arrogance had crumbled, her eyes hollow. Mark shuffled past, head bowed, stripped of the arrogance he once flaunted. My parents, once so certain of their standing, now faced a reckoning they could not escape. The contract was mine again. My name restored. But more than that, I had reclaimed something I had lost long ago. My strength, my voice, my place in the world. I stepped outside the courthouse into the crisp Denver air. The sky stretched wide and bright above me. For the first time in years, I felt free. The weeks that followed were a blur of rebuilding, a strange mixture of freedom and exhaustion. I moved into a new apartment, small but filled with light, its windows overlooking the city skyline. The walls were bare, yet they carried a promise. A sense of beginning again, without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I had made a choice, one I knew was final. I cut all ties with my family. No more calls that ended in silence. No more visits that left me hollow. No more desperate attempts to win their approval. My sister, my parents, they belonged to a past I no longer needed. The freedom of that decision was like breathing deeply for the first time in years. The legal consequences rippled outward. My sister began serving her 4-year sentence, her hunger for power reduced to the cold steel of a prison cell. The court ordered her to pay restitution $200,000 for the damage she caused. Mark, the willing pawn in her scheme, faced 2 years behind bars and a fine of $20,000. And my parents, silent in their complicity, were ordered to pay $75,000 in damages. Their reputations collapsed. The proud family name they clung to was now whispered in tones of pity and scorn throughout the community. Once admired, they became symbols of betrayal. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate their downfall. What I felt instead was relief. Relief that they could no longer reach me, no longer twist my life into something small. But I also knew my story couldn't just end with me reclaiming what was mine. The loneliness of that hospital bed, the sting of being abandoned, had shown me that countless others must face the same kind of betrayal. People silenced, manipulated, erased by the very families who should have loved them. I couldn't turn away from that knowledge. So, I made another choice. I invested $500,000 from my contract into a foundation based in Denver, dedicated to victims of familial abuse and betrayal. Legal aid, counseling, safe housing, the kind of support I had so desperately needed. At the launch event, standing before a modest crowd, I spoke from the rawest part of myself. No one should ever feel alone in their fight, I said. My voice carrying not just my words but my scars. The foundation was more than charity. It was a promise, a way to transform pain into purpose, to turn my survival into something greater than myself. In the quiet of my new apartment, I often reflected on the journey that had brought me here. My sister's greed, my parents' indifference, their attempt to erase me, it had all been meant to break me, but instead it revealed the core of who I was. Stronger than their lies, stronger than their abandonment. I thought of the courtroom, of my sister's hollow eyes when the verdict was read. I thought of Mark, stripped of his excuses. I thought of my parents, their faces crumbling under the weight of accountability. And I realized something. Justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about triumph. It was about standing up. Even when the odds seemed impossible. Even when your own family has become your enemy. My algorithm was back in my hands, and I was already preparing its next phase, determined to make it bigger, better, more impactful than ever. But the greatest victory wasn't in contracts or restitution. It was in the quiet strength I had discovered, the truth I had finally embraced. For years, I had chased their validation. For years, I believed that if I just achieved enough, if I just proved myself, they would finally see me, finally love me. But lying in that hospital bed, abandoned, I found something far more powerful. I found my own worth. Resilience had carried me through the pain, the lies, the courtroom battles, and now it carried me into a future I was building on my terms. As I stood one evening by the window, Denver's city lights glittering below like scattered stars, I whispered the truth to myself. I am enough. I always was. And now, it was time to live that truth.